What if I told you you were never meant to obey, not your schedule, not your job, not even your own anxiety? What if the very system you're trying to survive was designed to keep you out of your own frequency? There's something you've always felt, a quiet hum beneath the noise of the world, a strange knowing that your life was supposed to feel different. But every time you tried to follow that feeling, something pulled you back, not with chains, but with shame, with fear. With stories that weren't even yours, you learned to wear masks, to shrink your light so others could feel comfortable in their shadows, to question your truth just because it didn't match the norm. But let me say it clearly. This system was never made for your soul. It was made to tame it. You were not born to fit in. You were born to vibrate. You were not meant to live from reaction. You were meant to move from resonance. And if your body feels heavy lately, if your heart has been aching for something it can't name, it's not because you're broken, it's because you're waking up. In this space, right here, right now, we're not chasing spiritual trends. We're remembering spiritual truths. This isn't about escaping the world. It's about unplugging from their world and returning to the frequency that was always yours. Because you didn't come here to be a product. You came here to be a pulse. Now breathe. Feel that? That's the beginning. In the next section, we'll go deeper into how this invisible system got inside your nervous system and how it taught your body to confuse survival with safety. We'll explore how your own energy was hijacked and how to gently take it back. Let's go there now. The system isn't just around you, it's inside you. You weren't taught how to feel. You were taught how to perform. You weren't raised to recognize your own energy. You were trained to override it, to meet expectations, chase deadlines, and suppress discomfort just to be accepted. And somewhere along the way, your body started to believe that's what safety meant. Not peace, but control. Not presence, but pressure. The system didn't just tell you what to do, it taught your nervous system what to expect and how to contract every time you dared to step outside the norm. This is what Bruce Lipton called the biology of belief. Your cells literally respond to the frequency of your environment and the stories you tell yourself to survive it. Joe Dispenza calls it the body as the unconscious mind. When repeated emotions become automatic, your body doesn't just remember the past, it replays it chemically and energetically over and over again. So if you've been feeling stuck, if you keep looping through the same emotional cycles, it's not because you're lazy or lost or ungrateful. It's because you've been trained to adapt to a world that never saw your true frequency. And here's the most important part. The system doesn't just manipulate your thoughts, it manipulates your frequency. It convinces you that tension is normal, that chasing is necessary, that exhaustion is a badge of honor. But what if the most powerful truth was hiding where you never thought to look? What if your burnout is not a sign of weakness, but your soul refusing to carry someone else's agenda? Let me explain. When you constantly force your body into action from a place of lack, your electromagnetic field contracts. You become energetically reactive instead of responsive, and that reaction feeds the system, because every time you judge yourself for needing rest, every time you silence your intuition because it doesn't make sense, every time you hold your breath to meet a deadline, you are reinforcing the very program you're trying to escape. Now listen carefully. This isn't about blame. This is about remembering that your energy was never meant to be currency for someone else's control. It was meant to be the compass of your own liberation. And if no one ever taught you that, that's not your fault, but it is your time. Now we'll go even deeper into how this invisible framework shaped your inner reality and how to start untangling your core energy from it. We'll explore the symbols, habits, and emotional frequencies that became invisible agreements, and what it really means to unplug, They didn't just teach you the rules, they taught you to forget yourself. You didn't choose this script, but over time, you started to believe it was yours. And when a belief is repeated often enough, not just by words, but by experiences, looks, silences, emotional responses, your nervous system begins to obey it, not because it trusts it, but because it wants to keep you safe. You see, survival doesn't ask if something is true, it only asks, have I felt this before? And if the answer is yes, your body locks it in. The sigh you hold in meetings, the pressure in your chest when you speak your truth, the guilt after saying no. But none of that is random. It's programming, but not of the mind, of the frequency. Here's the deeper truth. You didn't just inherit behaviors, you inherited frequencies. Whole emotional fields passed down through generations of silence, fear, compliance, burnout dressed as responsibility. These are the invisible agreements you were never conscious of making. I'll stay small if it makes them feel more comfortable. I'll disconnect from my needs as long as I'm needed. I'll betray my intuition as long as I'm not abandoned. And while the world applauded your sacrifice, your soul kept whispering, this is not your rhythm. But how could you hear it when everything around you told you that your intuition was too much, that your emotion was irrational, that your truth was too disruptive? You didn't forget who you are. You were trained to ignore the parts of you that didn't serve the system. And here's where it gets even more important, because every time you suppress your truth, you're not just avoiding discomfort, you're fracturing your own electromagnetic field. Your energy becomes incoherent, split between what you feel and what you pretend, between what your soul knows and what your body is forced to tolerate. You've seen it before, you just didn't know how to read it. That strange fatigue after being around people who don't see you. That emotional hangover after pleasing everyone but yourself. That numbness that creeps in when you abandon your boundaries too many times. Those are not personality traits, they're energetic responses to misalignment, and they are the breadcrumbs back to your original frequency. So take a breath, not to relax, but to remember. This moment right now isn't asking you to fix anything, it's asking you to feel what you've been trained to suppress. Because when you finally name it, you start to unplug. Now, we'll go even deeper. We'll begin to trace how these emotional loops were formed and how the mind-body relationship plays a critical role in sustaining the illusion. We'll look at how awareness isn't just a mental act, it's a vibrational shift, and how that shift can begin now. The loop isn't just emotional, it's electromagnetic. Most people think they're repeating the same situations because of bad luck. But what if repetition isn't random? What if it's energetic? The patterns you keep attracting, the relationships that drain you, the moments that silence you, the cycles of effort without fulfillment, they're not punishments, they're frequencies. Here's how it works. Your body stores unresolved emotions, not just as memories, but as charge, emotional charge, electromagnetic data. And every time something reminds your nervous system of that unresolved moment, it sends the same signal through your field, pulling in a similar response from the outside world. Not to hurt you, but to show you what's still vibrating inside. This is not philosophy, it's physics. Incoherent emotion, shame, resentment, guilt, chronic self-doubt emits a chaotic signal. And the universe, as a perfect mirror of frequency, responds with matching chaos. But here's the key. The pattern only stays alive as long as your awareness is asleep, because once you begin to see the loop, it starts to dissolve. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're always the one who fixes things. You stay calm in conflict, you absorb the emotional charge of others, and you say yes, even when every cell in your body screams no. You think that's maturity, but it's actually a loop, a frequency loop formed from early conditioning where love was earned through emotional labor. Your body, trained in that pattern, emits the signal, "I'll regulate everything if it keeps me safe." And guess what? The system, the collective field, sends more situations for you to regulate, more energy for you to clean, more weight that isn't yours. But what if you didn't? What if you allowed the chaos to stay outside of you, just for a moment? What if you chose coherence, even if it meant breaking the pattern of being the one who holds it all? Because coherence doesn't come from controlling the outside. It comes from reconnecting with the inside, consistently, compassionately, and without performance. And here's the process. Start noticing what emotions trigger urgency in your body. That's not intuition, that's programming. Start noticing what situations make you feel responsible for everyone's peace. That's not love, that's learned survival. Start noticing the tension behind your kindness, the fear behind your ambition, the silence behind your smile. That's where your frequency is asking to come home. You are not the loop, you're the one watching it. And when you remember that, you begin to shift everything. Now we'll go even deeper into the subtle, often invisible ways this frequency control shows up in your daily life. We'll explore how systems of scarcity, urgency, and emotional suppression feed on your energy without your permission. And most importantly, how to reclaim that permission. The system feeds on what you don't notice. It doesn't need to chain your body if it can confuse your frequency. It doesn't need to take your freedom if it can take your attention. And once your attention is hijacked, your energy follows. Because where your awareness goes, your power flows. That's why the system doesn't just sell you products. It sells you emotions. Emotions designed to keep your vibration dependent on the external. Scarcity, urgency, disconnection dressed up as success. Let me show you. You wake up, check your phone, and within 5 seconds you've already felt behind. Behind on messages, behind on goals, behind on the version of yourself you're supposed to be by now. Then comes the rush, not from excitement, but from cortisol. You move fast, you answer quickly, you say yes without checking in, because stillness feels unsafe. And that is the loop. You've seen it before, but now you know how to read it. The loop isn't just in your habits, it's in the frequency underneath them, the energy of "I'm not enough yet," the hum of "I need to do more to earn peace." And here's where it gets deeper. The system doesn't need you to suffer. It just needs you to stay distracted. Because true awakening doesn't start with rebellion. It starts with presence. The kind of presence that feels foreign at first. The kind that makes you uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, but because you've been trained to associate stillness with danger. This is where the illusion breaks. When you feel anxious in silence, that's not your fault. It's your body reacting to withdrawal from the chaos it was conditioned to crave. When you feel guilt after resting, that's not laziness. That's the voice of programming losing its grip. When you feel empty after meeting all your goals, that's your soul whispering, "This isn't why you came here." So breathe with me here. You were never meant to chase peace like a finish line. You were meant to remember it as a baseline. You don't need to fight the system. You need to stop feeding it your frequency. And the moment you become aware of how often you trade presence for productivity, that's the moment your energy begins to return to you. This isn't about doing less. It's about doing it from the place that's truly yours. Now we'll go even deeper into the quantum mechanics behind how your energy field collapses and expands in relation to these emotional patterns. We'll explore how the observer effect is not just a scientific concept, but a spiritual principle, and how your perception is the very mechanism that rewrites your reality. Perception isn't passive, it's creative. In the quantum world, nothing is solid until it is observed. Until consciousness touches it, everything exists as potential. This is the observer effect. But here's the part no one told you. It's not just atoms that behave this way. Your entire reality responds to the way you look at it. Your thoughts don't just reflect the world, they activate it. Your emotions don't just react to your circumstances, they shape them. Every belief you hold becomes a lens through which the universe rearranges itself to match your vibration. That's not magic, that's resonance. So when your perception is stuck in fear, the field around you collapses into experiences that echo that fear. When your attention is wired into urgency, life begins to rush back at you, not because the world is against you, but because it's attuned to your frequency. Let me explain. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are the field in which they take shape. When you believe you're unworthy, you don't just attract unworthy experiences. You miss the worthy ones. You ignore the signals that point to healing. You walk past the exit doors because you don't recognize them as yours. That's how strong the observer is. You've seen it happen. That moment when you change the way you see a person and suddenly they change. That moment when you let go of proving yourself and you finally get the recognition you were chasing. It's not coincidence, it's collapse. A collapse of the old wave, the old possibility, into something you're finally able to receive. But there's a catch. Your frequency can't shift until your perception does. You can't feel freedom while still looking through the lens of survival. You can't receive softness while expecting betrayal. You can't hear your intuition through the noise of self-doubt. So what's the way out? Presence. Not as a spiritual performance, but as a moment-to-moment remembering of your power as the observer. That's why the system floods your senses. Because if you ever got still enough, you'd remember you're the one collapsing the waves. You'd realize you're not just in the matrix. You're generating it, and if you change the frequency within, the whole structure begins to shift without force. Now we'll go even deeper into how emotional memory, inherited beliefs, and body programming interact to form your perceptual lens. We'll explore how to begin breaking that lens gently, with compassion and clarity, without falling into guilt or blame. And we'll start uncovering the identity beneath the conditioning. You're not broken. You're just seeing through a cracked lens. Before you knew what your name was, you knew what your energy felt like. Before you spoke your first words, you could feel the vibration of safety, or the lack of it, in a room. That's how early it starts. You weren't taught who you are. You were taught how to adapt to who others needed you to be, and your nervous system adjusted accordingly, not out of weakness, but out of love. Because love, to a child, is survival. And survival, when repeated long enough, becomes identity. So by the time you could speak your truth, you had already learned to filter it. By the time you could trust your body, you had already learned to doubt it. By the time you knew what felt good, you had already learned to prioritize what looked good. And somewhere along the way, you began to confuse performance with purpose. But here's what no one told you. You are not the identity you created to survive. You are the frequency that remembers who you were before the world got loud. That frequency is still inside you. It's not gone. It's just layered beneath emotional echoes, layered beneath inherited fear, layered beneath generational exhaustion that was never yours to carry. Let me go even deeper. Your emotional patterns are not just habits. They're information. They hold data from your past and from the lives that shaped you before this one. The shame that rises when you speak your boundaries, the guilt that follows rest, the fear of being too much in your fullness. These aren't flaws. They're frequencies passed through lineages of silence, struggle, and unprocessed grief. But just because you inherited the lens doesn't mean you can't change the view. Here's how you start, not by fixing yourself, but by noticing. Notice the tension behind your apology. Notice the emptiness after another achievement. Notice the subtle betrayal in saying, "I'm fine," when you're not. and then pause, not to judge, but to feel. Because feeling is how the field reorganizes. Feeling is how energy returns to truth. You don't need a spiritual breakthrough. You need a space inside you that's honest enough to say, this isn't me anymore. Because that moment of truth, however small, is a frequency shift. And that's how you begin to unplug. In the next section, before we continue even deeper, I want to thank you. If you've stayed with me this far, you're already shifting something. I invite you to take a moment and share in the comments. Have you ever felt like your energy didn't belong to you anymore? Like you were living someone else's rhythm? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to feel less alone, and your voice carries medicine. Unplugging isn't escape, it's a return. Thank you for being here. If you've reached this part of the journey, something inside you is already remembering. Even if you don't have words for it yet, maybe it's a soft ache, maybe it's a rising clarity, maybe it's just the sense that you're not crazy for feeling what you've always felt. So let me ask you, have you ever looked around and thought, this world doesn't make sense to me? Not because you're broken, but because your frequency was never meant to match the system you were dropped into. That feeling isn't dysfunction, it's guidance, and it's sacred. Because the moment you notice that dissonance, the moment you finally admit, this isn't mine, you're no longer plugged in unconsciously. You begin to wake up from within. But what does it actually mean to unplug? It doesn't mean burning it all down. It doesn't mean quitting your job or leaving your life behind. That's not liberation, that's reaction. Unplugging means remembering your rhythm before the programming. It means returning to your own breath before the expectations. It means creating micro moments of coherence in a world that thrives on fragmentation. Let me give you an example. You're standing in line. Your phone's in your hand. Your brain wants to scroll, to stay stimulated, to stay connected, to avoid stillness. But something inside you pauses, and instead of reaching for more noise, you reach inward. You notice your heartbeat. You notice your shoulders. You notice the way your breath fills your belly, then softens. In that moment, you've unplugged, not from the phone, from the frequency. Because unplugging isn't always dramatic. It's subtle, quiet, consistent. It's the choice to respond from within instead of reacting from without. And it's a choice you can make in the middle of anything. That's what it means to live from your core frequency. You're not ignoring the world. You're no longer outsourcing your vibration to it. Next, we'll go deeper into the practice. We'll explore how to identify your true frequency beneath the conditioning and how to start rebuilding your energetic center from a place of softness, not force. This is where the real shift begins. Not through escape, but through reconnection. Your core frequency isn't a concept. It's a feeling you forgot how to trust. It's not somewhere out there. It's not hidden in a book or waiting at the end of a spiritual retreat. It's closer than your thoughts. More familiar than your name. It's the vibration that existed before the world told you who to be. And the most beautiful part? It's still here, beneath the tension in your chest. Beneath the habits you don't question, beneath the version of you that smiles on the outside but feels disconnected on the inside. Let's go there now. Here's the process. First, pause. Not to stop the world, just enough to feel yourself again. Feel your breath, not control it, just feel it. Let it arrive without effort. Let your belly rise, let your ribs soften, let your shoulders drop. Even just a little. Next, notice what's loud inside you. Maybe it's a thought, maybe it's a sensation, maybe it's just a tightness you can't name. You don't need to fix it, you only need to stay. Now, bring your hand to your chest. Feel the warmth, the presence, feel how real it is. This is home. Repeat softly inside yourself, I unplug now. I return to what's mine. I remember my frequency. No rush, no pressure, no performance, only presence, because the body knows when you're being honest. It can tell when your words align with your field, and it relaxes, not when it hears something powerful, but when it feels something true. You may not feel a sudden shift, you may not feel anything at all, but the moment you choose stillness over story, you've already shifted. You've already stepped out of the trance. You've already begun the return. Let that be enough. In the next section, we'll integrate this energy. We'll talk about how to hold this vibration even when life pulls you back into chaos, and how to recognize when you're slipping into the old pattern, not as failure, but as a call to remember. This is the work of coherence, not perfection, coherence. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to stay coherent. Integration isn't about holding your frequency perfectly. It's about recognizing when you've left it and knowing how to return without shame. The world won't stop testing your alignment. Not because it's cruel, but because every test is a mirror showing you where your energy still wavers. You'll still feel triggered. You'll still forget. You'll still have moments when old patterns feel louder than your new awareness. And that's not a setback, that's feedback. Because every time you notice the shift, every time you say, wait, this isn't me anymore, your nervous system gets the message. We're safe to change. That's coherence. Not being calm all the time, not living in a bubble of peace, but learning how to find your way back, faster, softer, and with less self-punishment. Here's how to hold your frequency in the real world. Start with awareness, not hypervigilance, not overthinking, just gentle noticing. Notice when your voice gets tighter around certain people. Notice when your breath leaves your body during a meeting. Notice when your smile feels like a mask, not a mirror. And when you notice, don't fix, feel. Because coherence doesn't come from control. It comes from compassion. You are not going backwards when old patterns resurface. You're meeting them from a new vibration, and that's everything. You see, when you shift your internal field, the external doesn't always catch up immediately. So people might still treat you like the version of you they knew. Systems might still pull at your old survival roles. But don't let that confuse you. You've already changed. And the more you hold this inner posture, this vibrational truth, the more your outer reality begins to respond. It's not about resisting the world. It's about no longer abandoning yourself within it. This is coherence. This is strength. This is the quiet revolution of energy that rewires everything, not with noise, but with presence. In the next and final section, we'll bring it all together. We'll close this journey with an energetic anchor, a remembrance of who you are beneath the noise, and a soft but powerful invitation to keep living from that space. Not someday, not when it's perfect, but now. You were never lost, just disconnected. There's nothing wrong with you. There never was. You didn't fail. You adapted. You didn't forget your truth, you just tuned it out to survive. But now, you're remembering. Maybe not all at once, maybe not loudly, but steadily, clearly, honestly. And that is everything. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people who remember who they are, without apology. You came here to vibrate, not to shrink. To speak from wholeness, not from habit. To feel what's real, not perform what's expected. So take this moment right now and let yourself feel what's different. Not what you've achieved, not what you've fixed, just what's alive. Maybe it's a breath that finally lands deeper. Maybe it's a thought that feels softer. Maybe it's the absence of pressure, even just for now. That's not small. That's the system losing its grip on your field. That's what happens when you unplug, because to live from your core frequency means you stop outsourcing your truth. You stop abandoning your rhythm. You stop negotiating your knowing, and you begin to remember what's always been yours. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for walking this path with your presence, your energy, and your heart. Thank you for showing up, not for me, but for yourself. If this video spoke to something inside you, leave a comment and tell us what part of your energy you're reclaiming today. Someone else might read your words and find their way back through you. If you felt this message, like it, subscribe, and stay with us on this journey. There's so much more waiting for you in the next video. You're not alone in this. You're part of something ancient and new, a remembering that's spreading, a pulse that's rising. And remember, you are not at the mercy of the external world. You are the field that transforms everything it touches. Until next time, stay soft, stay sovereign, and keep living from your true frequency.